this point, based on what happened last night, do you know anything better about it now than you did last night?
No. They've got people everywhere looking for him. I mean, you can hear the helicopters out there, and but they haven't seen anything, and it's crazy. And it's been since 9 o'clock last night, and I really thought that when it got daylight they would find him just in a heartbeat, but I hadn't.
Was there anything about the demeanor of the man that gives you concern?
No, in fact, when he made me get out of the car, I tried to get my children. I just begged him, please let me take them. And he said no, he didn't have time because they were in car seats and it was going to take time for me to get them out of the car seat. And he just told me, he said, but I won't hurt them. And he just took off. But he had a gun, and my big thing is they were screaming, hollering, crying. And I'm just scared that he just lost his patience or something, I don't know. All I'm doing is just praying and just keeping my faith that they're going to be okay.
You've never seen this guy before?
No, sir. Never.
And he just came out of the blue?
I was stopped at a red light, and I was looking this way, looking toward the left, and it was just like, in a second, he was in my car. He just opened the car door, and I just screamed. I said, what are you doing? He just shut up and drive, and he had a gun, and he was poking it in my side, and told me to drive. And so I drove, and I was trying to ask him one time, why, what do you want? Please just, don't hurt me or the children. He said, and he never said anything. All he ever told me was, shut up or I'll kill you. He said, don't say anything else. And my children were crying, and I was trying to tell them, that it was okay, that, don't worry. And he would, and he let me talk to them. And then we just got maybe 3 or 4 miles down the road, and he told me, I want you to stop. And I said, stop right here? He said, yeah, stop right here. And it was just in the middle of the road. And I stopped, and he told me to get out, and I was in the driver's side, he was in the passenger side, and so I opened the door. I said, I'm going to get my children before I go. He said, no, you can't. He said, I don't have time for that. He just, and sort of pushed me on out the door, helped me get on out the door, and he slammed the door and took off, and I ran to the closest house that I could, and
I'm really sorry.
She cried for the cameras while the truth sank beneath the surface. In 1994, America was searching for 2 little boys. Their mother claimed a stranger kidnapped them, but investigators uncovered something far darker.
One of the most disturbing cases in true crime history. A mother's lie shocked the entire nation, and the truth still haunts America today. This is the story of Susan Smith. I'm Jimbo.
And I'm Dustin, and this is Dark Discoveries. Welcome back to Dark Discoveries. What, Jimbo? You're shaking your head.
You paused yourself, didn't you?
I did. I had to cough.
Yeah. And no, you did. I was watching you. You was trying to, I couldn't remember what button you pushed.
I cleared my throat. No, I was waiting on you because I thought you were kicking this off like we had talked.
No, you said, I'll kick it off.
Oh, I don't remember what I said. But what is today? Today is Mother's Day.
Recording day?
Well, it's not recording day, but it's recording day. But we thought we would do something a little bit special here tonight in honor of all the killer mothers out there, and not the ones that do what this psychopath did. The ones that just knock it out of the park for being awesome moms who raise awesome people.
Like our moms.
For you.
Like our moms.
Yeah, exactly. Like my mom.
And Jackie's mom. Jackie's mom's pretty awesome too.
I got the best mom in the world.
No. My mom would take your mom.
I doubt it.
I don't know.
I doubt it. My mom used to have a mean streak that was a mile wide. Then she found God, and all of a sudden she's really nice. And she'll feed you really good too. But this mom that we're listening to, I don't believe her for a second.
Oh, dude, I remember when this came out, when this was happening, I remember watching the TV, wondering what's happening. And boy, as this story unravels, it's heartbreaking what actually happens.
Was there a demeanor that made you? No, I didn't really feel nothing different with him. I thought he was okay.
He told me just to get out of the car right there in the middle of the road. I said, I'm going to grab my children. He said, no, you're not. I ain't got time for that.
You want me to park his car right here in the middle of the street? Like right in the middle of the road?
Like he just told me to drive.
Casey Anthony at least kept it together, I think, if my memory serves me right. This girl had no freaking, she was winging it. She did not rehearse it. She didn't write it.
I think they caught her on the spot or something, like she was walking out of her house or something. They just caught her and she was trying to think up of stuff all the time. I was in the driver's side and he was right there in the passenger side and I was looking this way and he had the gun right here in my side and my kids were in their car seats.
I already buckled them in their car seat. I just didn't know what to do. And we are not making fun of the victims at all.
No.
Just the stupidity of this woman. And I hope she hears me say that. Come after me. You're not getting out of prison. They denied your parole.
Yeah, but she'll be eligible again. What, 4 years?
And I hope they deny it again because these people deserve to not rot in hell. They just need to be hooked up to old Sparky and just not have us pay, tax dollars for this. So with that being said, I think we should probably start this episode, but I just want to say before I start reading that I do have the best mother in the world. So,
and I just want to say mine's better than Dustin's. And let's just say our mothers are equal and they got two pretty awesome sons. How about that?
You just said your mom's better. So I'm going to get the militia started and we're going to start heading down to Greenwood.
My mom don't live in Greenwood.
No, we're coming to your house.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm saying. We're not.
As long as we can go to Yummy Bowl first.
I got that place figured out. You put the meat in first. If they're not busy, then you put your noodles on top so your meat don't fall out. And then you can put more in your bowl. If you don't have a Yummy Bowl, find one because it's pretty damn good. So before America knew who Susan Smith was, as a mother who would drive her children into a lake, she was simply a girl growing up in the small town, a mill town of Union, South Carolina. If you could not tell from that accent, she is from the South. And I usually find Southern accents attractive, but for some reason that one just does not work for me. By the 1970s, Union was deeply traditional. It was quiet on the surface, and it was shaped by church culture, poverty, which happens a lot in those areas as well, and family reputations. It was a kind of small southern town where people often hid pain behind politeness. Susan was born Susan Lee Vaughn in 1971 into a family already carrying instability. Her parents divorced when she was young, and the emotional foundation of her childhood became even more fragile when her father died by suicide. That loss would hang over her life like a shadow. Children who see parents that way often grow up wrestling with abandonment, insecurities. I'm sure the emotional, stress of, was it me? Did he do it because of me? And the fear that love can disappear in a moment's notice without warning. As Susan got older, people described her as attractive, outgoing, and emotionally intense. She was not emotionally intense in that interview.
No. I mean, dude, she, if you watch it, she's almost trying to cry, but she can't cry. That's the weird part about it. She kind of like gets choked up, like, I need to cry here, but she doesn't.
And I know, if this was real, you're going to try to stay strong, but I don't understand any situation that my kid could be gone that I wouldn't be an emotional wreck 24/7.
Right.
Her moving out in a couple of years is going to put me through an emotional, you just had a daughter leave the house. Did it feel weird?
Yeah. And actually, in just about, when this releases, about 9 days, she's getting married.
And that's going to be the next, she's completely out of,
Yeah, she's gone.
She's somebody else's problem now. I did all I can do. She's somebody else's problem. But early, she learned that attention would bring her comfort and approval. She became highly sensitive to rejection, Friends and classmates often saw her as someone who wanted desperately to be liked and loved. Behind that image, however, there were signs of something deeper: emotional instability. Later reports and testimony suggested she experienced sexual abuse by her stepfather during adolescence, and I guess that could be, I'm trying to figure out what caused somebody to do this. That's probably the first cornerstone of the foundation of what led us down that road, if I had to take a guess. This added another layer of trauma to her already difficult upbringing, whether viewed psychologically or simply as a part of her personal history. These experiences likely shaped the way she viewed relationships, trust, and her own self-worth, if I could spit that word out.
By her teenage years, Susan had become skilled at adapting herself to whoever was around her. She could appear vulnerable, charming, affectionate, or wounded, depending on what emotional response she needed from people. Those who later studied her life often pointed to this period as the beginning of a pattern. Her identity becoming heavily dependent on attention, validation, and romantic attachment. She seemed terrified of abandonment and emotionally unequipped to handle rejection in healthy ways. What makes her early life unsettling in hindsight is how ordinary it appeared from the outside. There were no obvious signs pointing toward the horror that would later define her name. She looked like countless other young women in small-town America, smiling in school photos, attending church, dreaming about marriage and family. Nothing in those early years openly suggested that she would one day become one of the most infamous mothers in American criminal history.
As Susan entered adulthood, she appeared to be building the life expected by young Southern women during the 1990s. She married David Smith, most generic name ever.
Davy Boy Smith. I got you on that one.
I just, that's just,
He wasn't even there.
Maybe that's, who knows? He was there long enough for them to have 2 kids, though. Michael and Alexander, to people around them, they looked like a normal family trying to make their way through the financial stress of small town life. There were family photos, church appearances, birthday parties, and the public image of a young mother devoted to her children. But beneath the surface, the marriage was strained almost from the start. Friends later described constant arguments, emotional instability, infidelity, and periods of separation. Money problems added to these pressures, and Susan reportedly struggled with depression and feelings of emptiness long before any of these tragedies occurred. Motherhood did not seem to give Susan the emotional stability many expected it would bring her. By all accounts, she loved her children at times deeply and genuinely, but she also appeared overwhelmed by the responsibility and consumed by her own emotional needs. Those who later analyzed her behavior often noted that Susan seemed to define herself through romantic attention more than her motherhood itself. And that's one thing that makes my mother great. From day one, her life was about taking care of us.
Mm-hmm.
She never put herself forward, in front of us. It was always us kids. She took care of us, and she always, figured out what she needed later. Like, we were always the number one priority. And that's why my mom is one of the greatest of all time. Gotta find my spot. So she craved affection, reassurance, and validation from men. And when relationships began to fail, her emotional state could spiral out of control quickly.
You would think when she had the first child that they would start noticing something, but no, she had a second child, right? So
for some reason, I think sometimes people think that, another one will fix this problem. It'll make him love me more. It'll fix the situation, when it only just compiles the stress that they already have.
Oh, yeah. The most important relationship during this period was her affair with Tom Finlay, the wealthy son of a local business family.
I wonder if he was fit.
Fit? Oh, Finlay, not Finley.
Yeah. It's close enough.
Only I get to make the wrestling jokes this episode there, Dustin. Susan became intensely attached to him. In many ways, he represented escape, a different social world, financial security, excitement, and the possibility of reinventing herself. But the relationship eventually began to collapse. Finley reportedly told her he did not want children in his life and did not see a future involving her sons. Those words became central to how investigators, prosecutors, and the public later interpreted the crime. What makes this stage of her life so disturbing in retrospect is the growing conflict between her identity as a mother and her obsession with romantic acceptance. The more emotionally dependent she became on Finley, the more her children may have come to represent obstacles to the life she imagined for herself. Whether consciously or unconsciously, her priorities appeared to shift in dangerous ways. Friends later recalled dramatic mood swings, emotional outbursts, and signs that Susan was unraveling internally while trying to maintain the image of a normal young mother externally.
So you're already married and things aren't going good, and you meet somebody, it sounds like, and I don't really want kids.
Well, let's face it. She was probably having trouble at home. And what was the one thing they were fighting about at home? Money. This guy was wealthy businessman. Ability. Number 2, right?
But like, oh, I don't want no kids wrapped up. Well, I like you, but this has to be a fling because my kids are important would be what most logical people would say. By the fall of 1994, Susan was living in a psychological state that many people around her failed to fully recognize. On the outside, she was struggling, but a familiar figure, a pretty young mother navigating marriage problems and emotional stress. Underneath it, though, however, there seemed to be growing desperation tied to rejection, loneliness, and the fear of losing the future that she'd always wanted. That desperation would soon collide with one of the most horrifying decisions in modern American criminal history. I'm going to say it probably ranks up there just as bad as, Bundy and Dahmer and all that stuff, because as soon as it involves a child, you just get pushed up the list. On the night of October 25th, 1994, Susan told police a story that would grip the entire country. Through tears, she claimed that a black man had approached her at a stoplight in Union, forced his way into the car, and driven away with her and her 2 sons still strapped inside. The image was instantly horrifying, a terrified mother standing helplessly on the side of the road after she was kicked out of the car. Her children had vanished into the night. National media descends on Union almost instantly. Search teams combed the woods, the lakes, the back roads. Volunteers handed out flyers across South Carolina. TV audiences watched Susan cry during interviews and plead directly into the cameras for the safe return of Michael and Alexander.
And I remember it being a media circus, man. It was just a circus. And you know what? For 9 days, America believed her. The emotional power of the story came largely from Susan herself. She appeared devastated. She prayed publicly. She spoke softly about missing her boys and begged the supposed kidnapper to bring them home. Millions of people sympathized with her because she looked like the image of a grieving young mother. Churches held vigils. Strangers mailed letters of support. Law enforcement agencies pursued leads across state lines. But investigators gradually began noticing problems with her account. Certain details did not match physical evidence. Her timeline shifted slightly during repeated questioning. Detectives also became suspicious of how controlled her emotions sometimes appeared once cameras were gone. The carjacking story itself began to unravel under scrutiny. Eventually, after days of interrogation, Susan confessed. The truth shocked the nation.
So do you think it was guilt that got her to confess?
Or she was like, there's no way I'm getting out of this. I better just, it's only going to get worse.
Because I think in a situation like that, you're going to just stress yourself to death. You're trying to keep, I can't keep presents, for like my wife and my daughter. Like I have to give them to them early. I can't hold it for weeks and months at a time without like just wanting to see the reaction. It's like, I'm the worst secret keeper that you're going to have. So, don't, if it's personal, that's one thing, but like something that you're going to bring joy to people with, I can't keep it very long. I got to just give it to them. So, I mean, that's me, but hiding something this dark, it's going to consume, it has to consume you. So she had driven her car to John D. Long Lake. She stopped near the boat ramp, exited the vehicle, and allowed it to roll into the dark water with Michael and Alexander still strapped in their car seats. Her sons were alive when the cars entered the lake. Divers later recovered the vehicle from the bottom with the children still inside. The details were almost unbearable for the public to process. The idea of two small children strapped in their car seats, or still strapped in their car seats, in the dark, cold water while their mother stood outside became one of the most haunting images in American history.
I mean, you try to picture that, and you just
I don't want to,
and you just hate this lady.
There's a lot of things that you can do that you can justify that may not be right, but there's no way to justify anything on this. And if I was somebody of power in South Carolina, I would be probably looking to see if we could bring back the firing squad, hanging, the electric chair. If any of that stuff's not on the table, I'd have been advocating for it. But maybe all that time in prison, if you make it miserable on her, it is enough to make her life hell every single day. Yeah, it's at our tax dollar, but if she has to relive that and be stuck in her own mind, maybe that is a worse punishment. So most of America, if not all of America, they struggled to understand not how just the murders themselves, but the calculated deception that followed them. Susan stood before cameras for days trying to cry. I'm sure she got some alligator tears out. And she begged for help when she already knew what the result was. The racial dimension of the false story intensified public outrage even further. By blaming an imaginary black man, Susan exploited racial fears that already existed in the South and diverted suspicion towards innocent people. And I'm sure at that point it did nothing to help the town, to unify. You're separating it. Police resources were wasted chasing a fictional fabrication of a suspect while the community reacted with fear and anger. The aspect of the case permanently shaped how many Americans viewed the crime, not simply as murder, but manipulation on multiple levels.
Well, let's think about it. So she had time to think of an alibi, and she has to go all the way through
Blackmail,
a black man.
Blackmail, black jeans, black hoodie, black hat.
So she's planned out a little bit of this, but her execution she's just terrible. As the news of the confession spread, sympathy turned almost instantly into horror and fury. The same television audiences who had cried for Susan now watched her being led away in handcuffs. Reporters described a feeling of disbelief hanging over the Union. Over Union, the town. People who had prayed beside her during vigils suddenly realized they had been witnessing a performance built on a lie. And beneath all of it remained the central questions that would haunt the case for decades. How could a mother do this to her own children? The trial of Susan Smith became more than a criminal proceeding. It became a national attempt to understand the unthinkable. By the time court began in 1995, there was no longer any doubt that she had caused the deaths of Michael and Alexander. Susan had confessed, and investigators had reconstructed the events leading into the car that was sinking down into the John D. Long Lake. The real battle inside the courtroom centered on a different question. Was she evil? Mentally broken?
Yeah.
Or something in between? Or all the above?
All of the above. Prosecutors presented Susan as a manipulative, selfish, and she was fully aware of what she was doing. They argued that her motive revolved around her obsession with Tom Finley and her desire for a life unburdened by children. Should have thought about that when you had children. I wish people would take having children as a responsibility because, you're taking on the responsibility of raising good people. According to the prosecution, Susan saw her sons as obstacles standing between herself and the future that she wanted. You know what? When those kids turn 18, you can have that future again. I'm 40 and my kid turns 18 this year. I got another 40 years to court my wife and go do things that.
Yeah, but she's probably thinking, oh, I'm happy with this business guy. I can't lose him because he doesn't want children and I have 2 kids.
I just, that's, and we got to put this in today's, for the younger listeners, we got to put it in a way they can understand. You're on Tinder. You swipe what, right?
I don't know. I've never been on Tinder, Dustin.
I don't either. But I don't know if left you keep, right you kick out, but whatever direction that you kick them away, you just swipe that direction. I just thought it was funny because we went to that another crazy killer mom, Hell's Bell. She made the Tinder reference. I guess I didn't pay attention enough. Man. Oof. They emphasized how calmly she had maintained the false kidnapping story for 9 days while the country searched desperately for 2 boys that were already dead. To many observers, the deception became almost as horrifying as the murders themselves. Jurors listened to the testimony about her lies, her affair, the emotional performance she gave to the media while investigators searched the lakes and the forests. The defense approached the case from an entirely different angle. They portrayed Susan as a deeply traumatized and psychologically damaged woman whose mental state had collapsed under years of depression, abandonment issues, emotional instabilities. Her attorneys introduced evidence about her father's suicide, allegations of sexual abuse during her childhood, which, if you've experienced that or currently experiencing that, please take this time, tell somebody, don't hide that burden in your life. Get it out, get it exposed, get it off your chest, and make the people responsible for their actions. Because once it happens, there's nothing you can do to fix it, but don't let it keep continuing because it does affect you very deep. And then, like I said, her long history of mental health struggles, experts described severe depression and suicidal thinking. The defense argued that Susan had not acted as a cold, calculated monster, but as somebody emotionally shattered and detached from reality at the time of the crime, which it almost feels like you're going to start playing the insanity card, which, that's the cop out here.
So, Dustin, do we know how far this lake is that she did this?
I don't know. I'm guessing probably not very far.
Well, let's think about it. She said she went down she put it on the boat ramp and let it go down. How many people for 9 days was on that boat ramp putting their boats in?
Well, the car, when you do it, it's going to go so far, it's going to float out a little bit. I don't know how she did it. I'm sure maybe a brick was involved. I don't know. But those cars will go out a decent way, and the current will kind of take them out a little bit. So by the time you get deep enough, the boats are going to clear it and not really hit it. But it's one of those, it was obviously close enough that she didn't think better of what she was about to do.
One of the most chilling aspects of the trial was hearing Susan's own words through letters, recorded statements, and testimony. Jurors were exposed to the depth of her emotional dependence on romantic relationships and her terror of rejection. The prosecution used those details to show narcissism and manipulation. The defense used them to show instability and psychological collapse. The courtroom became a clash between 2 narratives about human behavior itself, whether terrible acts come from pure evil or from damaged minds unraveling under pressure. Outside the courthouse, the case consumed national media. Every expression on Susan's face was analyzed. Commentators debated motherhood, mental illness, morality, and race. Some people saw her as one of the most cold-blooded killers in modern America. Others believed she was mentally ill and should not face execution. The fact that she was young, attractive, and soft-spoken complicated public relations even further. America struggled to reconcile her appearance with the brutality of the crime.
I don't care how you look. That doesn't, oh, let's cut her a break because she's a pretty young woman. No, not at all. In the end, the jury spared Susan from the death penalty, which I'm on the fence on that personally. She was convicted of the murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years, which I also disagree with. The decision divided the public. Some believe that justice had failed because we allowed her to live. Others believed executing a psychologically damaged woman would not restore what had been lost. Let's be honest, no matter what you do, it does not restore what happened, but you can give people closure by knowing that it will never happen again at their hands. When the sentence was read, the legal process ended, but the cultural obsession with the case did not. In many ways, the trial was not just the beginning of Susan Smith becoming something larger and darker inside the American imagination. Not just a convicted murder, but a symbol of betrayed motherhood and a hidden evil hiding behind an ordinary face. After the trial ended, Susan Smith disappeared physically into the prison system, but she never disappeared from the public's imagination. Most murder cases fade with time. Hers did not. The image of a crying mother on television, knowing all along that her children, where they were at, what she had done, remained permanently burned into the public's memory. Every few years, the story resurfaced through documentaries, interviews, magazine specials, and like what we're doing, True Crime Podcast. Next, the new generations who had not even been alive in 1994 would encounter the case and react with the same mixture of horror and disbelief.
Inside prison, Susan's life became strangely divided between isolation and notoriety. Reports about her behavior periodically leaked to the media, keeping public fascination alive. There were stories of disciplinary issues, relationships with men outside prison, and attempts to maintain emotional connections through letters and phone calls. Even decades later, people continued writing to her, some out of curiosity, some out of sympathy, and others because they were drawn to infamous criminals. That ongoing attention disturbed many observers because it suggested that the same emotional dynamics that shaped her early life had never been really completely disappeared, gone from her life. Over time, psychologists, journalists, and documentary filmmakers repeatedly revisited the central mystery of the case. What was happening inside Susan Smith's mind the night her children died? Some viewed her primarily through the lens of narcissism and emotional dependency. Others focused on trauma, depression, and unresolved psychological damage stretching back to childhood. The public never reached a consensus because the crime resisted easy explanation. It felt too intimate, too unnatural, and too emotionally devastated to fit neatly into one category.
What also haunted people was how ordinary Susan appeared before the murders. She didn't match the public stereotype of a monster. She looked normal. She looked vulnerable, approachable. That disconnect became part of the fear surrounding the case. It forced people to confront the possibility that terrible, violent people can exist beneath the surface and seem completely normal. As years passed, the boys themselves became frozen in time within the public's memory. Michael remained forever 3 years old. Alexander will forever remain as a toddler. Their photographs will never age. Meanwhile, Susan continued to grow older behind the bars in her prison cell. That imbalance created a particularly haunting and emotional effect for many people following the case. The children stayed innocent and unchanged while the person responsible continued to live year after year after year.
The parole process reopened wounds all over again. Whenever hearings approached, media coverage intensified and public anger resurfaced. Families of the victims, community members, and many across the country argued that Susan should never be released. Others questioned whether decades of imprisonment and psychological treatment changed anything about who she had become. Each discussion forced America to revisit the same uncomfortable questions about guilt, punishment, forgiveness, and whether certain crimes permanently place someone outside the possibility of redemption. By the time 3 decades passed, Dustin, that's 30 years.
30 years on.
I just want to make sure you knew.
You're the one struggling trying to figure out how long 3 decades was.
Susan Smith had evolved from a criminal defendant into something closer to an American cultural ghost. Her story lingered because it struck at one of the society's deepest expectations, the belief that a mother's instinct is to protect her children at all costs. When that expectation shattered, the shock echoed far beyond the courtroom and far beyond South Carolina.
Today, Susan remains imprisoned in South Carolina, still carrying one of the most infamous names in American criminal history. In 2024, she faced her very first parole hearing after serving nearly 30 years for the murders of her 2 sons. The hearing drew national attention once again, proving that the case still holds an emotional grip on the public decades later. The family of the victims, prosecutors, and many members of the public strongly urged against her release, and parole was denied. Her next opportunity for review, you said it already happened?
I thought I read it happen, but it's this year sometime, if not.
It may be coming up, yeah. I don't remember seeing it recently. What is striking about present day is how little the emotional weight of this case has faded away. Most crimes eventually become a statistic or a history reference. Susan Smith's story still feels immediate to many people. It touches something deep and unsettling about trust, family, and a normal person's appearance. The footage of her tearful pleas remained widely available, and watching those interviews, knowing what had already happened, continues to disturb viewers. People often describe the feeling of unease, seeing how convincingly she tried to perform this grief while still trying to conceal the truth, which I didn't watch the video, but just listening to her, it just seemed like a horrible performance. I think I could have acted better than that.
Susan herself is now far removed from the young woman the world saw in 1994. Age, prison, and decades of notoriety have transformed her physically, but the public image attached to her name has barely changed. To many Americans, she remains frozen as the crying mother standing before cameras asking for help finding her children, who she already knew were dead. That moment became permanent cultural memory. At the same time, Michael and Alexander remain permanently young in the public imagination. Their photographs still show smiling young boys, untouched by time. Their contrast continues to haunt people following the case. They never had a chance to reach adulthood, never had a chance to get married, never had to have children of their own, or even go to the lakes, with their kids or family reunions. But, old Susan, she's still getting 3 square meals a day and some yard time out there in South Carolina.
3 hots and a cot.
Yeah. So, it creates an emotional imbalance that many people find impossible to reconcile.
I think if anything, send her down to Arizona to that sheriff that feeds the inmates green bologna. You got your little tent camp out in the middle of the desert and you get green bologna. Should nothing be pleasurable for her. The case also continues to be studied through a broader cultural and psychological lenses. Discussions about trauma, mental illnesses, narcissism, race, media manipulation, and motherhood still surround the story. Some researchers focus on her psychological damage and emotional instability. Others reject those explanations entirely and see the crime as a pure act of selflessness and cruelty. The debate itself has become part of why the story continues to endure. People are still searching for an explanation that fully makes sense of what happened, and none of those ever seem complete enough for you. Another thing, and I'm a person who thinks the same way, what draws me into some of these stories is what makes somebody do this, what's going through their head. World War II for me is a great topic because there's so many people who did horrible things. What makes somebody go to that level? We'll never know, but it's fascinating trying to figure it out. Like, what really is there something that could have happened or you can do to reverse somebody from getting to that point? But in the end, Susan's story remains disturbing, not simply because of the murders, but because of what they shattered. The case destroyed comforting assumptions people hold about innocence, maternal instinct, and the ability to recognize dangers in ordinary life. That is why the story continues to linger in documentaries, and like I said, we said podcasts, books, and then conversations decades after this happened. It is not remembered just as another murder case. It survives as a symbol of betrayal hidden beneath familiarity. A reminder that some of the darkest acts in American history come from people who once seemed to be completely ordinary. And I'm going to drop a teaser. We got a whole big deep dive coming up of another person who on the outside looked like just a normal person, living the American dream. But, we know that's not going to be the case.
Yep.
We wouldn't be talking about them.
Some crimes fade because they are too distant for most people to emotionally enter. Susan Smith's case did the opposite. It actually forced millions of Americans to imagine something unbearable in intimate detail. 2 young children who were trusted to one person and who was supposed to protect them whenever it mattered most. That is why the story endured. It was not only the murders themselves, it was the layers surrounding them, the image of motherhood, the public grief of, the performance of grief she did, the televised tears, the racial lie, the days spent searching for children already dead. Every part of the case seemed to deepen the horror instead of explaining it. I read somewhere, or I was listening to her or something, and she, I don't know if it was in her confession or not, but it said that when she put the car in neutral, that her kids were screaming her name and, mommy, mommy. And, as it went, and I was like, how can you live with yourself for something like that? Yeah. I don't know, man. That's just a total evil and cold and callous. And
oh yeah. I mean, and like I said, that's the whole thing that I think that drew everybody into this. And what do you think's going to happen? You think that the wealthy, smart businessman you're having an affair with
is going to stay with you?
You think that he's really going to buy the story? He's going to buy the way you're acting? You really think that he believes you?
How would you like to be that guy? Get dragged into this story and be like, I don't know, man. And then her husband, her husband.
If I would have said, I don't mind kids, these 2 kids would still be alive.
Right. In the years that followed, Susan Smith became more than a convicted murderer in the public mind. She became a symbol tied to a specific fear that evil does not always look monstrous. Sometimes it looks calm, attractive, soft-spoken, and familiar. That ideal unsettled people far more deeply than obvious violence ever could.
The case also arrived in a particular time of America. And the 1990s were dominated by television or televised crime coverage. Like O.J. Simpson. There's a lot of things.
Cops.
What's that?
Cops.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing this unfold on TV now. It's not something you just read about or just get a news update on. You're watching certain things happen in live time. One of the earliest crime things I remember watching on TV was I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but the big California bank shootout where they had the gunmen came out with assault rifles and they were
like assault on the precinct 13 or where they attacked the cops.
Yeah, and they just went you think you're gonna get out of this? You know what I mean? It was a lot of that raw footage was shown on live TV, and as a young child, that stuff kind of sticks with you. So, as audience watch this unfold live with the emotional intensity that blurred the lines between news and national trauma, parents saw that their own children in Michael and Alexander, when the truth emerged, many people felt that they were personally deceived, almost as if they had been manipulated alongside the investigators. Like I said, the racial dimension shaped the legacy of this as well by falsely accusing an imaginary black man for the kidnapping. Susan tapped into the fears of some of these stereotypes that were very deeply rooted in the South. Innocent people become targets of a suspicion while, like we said, police resources, and this is a small town with probably minimal budgets, are getting blown looking for something that's false and taking away their resources from possibly something more important. But here we are dealing with, this crazy woman. For many observers, this transformed the case from a personal tragedy into something socially poisonous.
How would you like to be a black man living in that town? When she said a black man did it, I mean, do you think every single one of them got questioned?
If not, for 9 days, they were probably looked at like, was it you?
Right. Terrible.
You go to the store, the gas station, to work, wherever you go, the grocery, they're going to...
This kind of reminds me of the Emmett Till story. Do you know Emmett Till?
A little bit. So you're going to have to...
Well, it's basically where a white woman said that he, whistled some derogatory comments at her and made passes at her, this black man. And it was totally a lie or whatever. And yeah, well, we might have to cover it, Dustin. It's pretty interesting. But they ended up stoning him or killing him. And it's very interesting. I think we need to do a deep dive on it because it is very racially motivated and it's so sad what these people do. But his mom had like an open casket, like, this is my son. This is what happened to him. Look what you guys did. And he didn't even do it. So
and it just sucks that, even here you are in 1990, we're still dealing with some of this stuff in 2026. I don't know why color of your skin has to be a topic anymore. Mm-hmm. We're 150 years past that. Like, we're Americans, we're people. Let's just coexist and get along. Like,
right.
Our blood all bleeds red. We're all trying to do the same thing and just provide and, make it through this life and to give our loved ones the best life that we can give them. Like, we can embrace each other and rally around each other and raise us all up by not looking at the minute details that don't matter.
Psychologists and criminologists continued revisiting the story because it sits in the intersection of several disturbing realities: trauma, depression, personality disorder, dependency, narcissism, maternal identity, and media manipulation. Yet, even after decades of analysis, the case still resists neat explanation. That may be part of why it continues haunting the public imagination. People want a single answer: evil, madness, selfishness, illness. But the truth appears tangled and incomplete. Over time, the story evolved into something almost mythic in American true crime. The lake itself became symbolic. The image of the submerged car became symbolic, and I remember them pulling the car out of the lake. It was all on TV. Even the phrase Susan Smith stopped functioning as just a name and became shorthand for betrayal of the deepest human trust imaginable. And perhaps the most haunting aspect of it all is this. That town is now forever marred.
Oh, yeah.
The reporters that reported it are now marred for life. I mean, you were there, you were trying to get the story out. You're like, oh, we got to get this kid. All the news coverage and everything, it's just a shame that this had to happen the way it happened and the way that she manipulated the media and America to get what she wanted.
Absolutely. The emotional imbalance is what keeps the story alive long after the courtroom closed. Susan Smith, this case unfolded at the exact moment Americans began their addiction with live television. The tragedies and everything that was, you got more people at home, before the soap operas or after the soap operas, you're going to watch something, right? Guiding light and as the world turned for these, these moms didn't last all day. The mid 1990s cable, I know some of these people listening, I think we have older people listening, the older audience around my age. Cable television, not streaming, where you paid so much a month and you had all these channels just to go back and forth. had transformed criminal investigations into national events that played out in living rooms across America. But Susan's story hit the public with a unusual force because it contained every emotional ingredient that TV thrives on. Grief, mysteries, fear, race, religion, missing children, and betrayal. And who was probably the ones? I know in the 90s, you still had more of that 9-to-5 job. Probably still had a lot more homemakers at home in the 90s than you do today. So who was watching these TV sets and watching the news? Probably the mothers, who are going to be the most outraged by what had happened. But during those 9 days, when the world thought Michael and Alexander had been kidnapped, Susan became the emotional center of the story. Cameras, like we talked about, that interview seemed like she was just pounced upon. They followed her constantly. They set up outside churches, police stations, and the family home. America watched her cry, pray, and plead for the returns of her children. The footage felt painful and sincere to some viewers. Parents imagined themselves in her position. Strangers mailed sympathy cards and stuffed animals. I bet you they felt way betrayed at that point when they realized that they had been duped. Volunteers, dedicated their time to search. Just all these people, you're looking for this, and you may be beside her looking. The betrayal, just all these people trying to rally are just getting shit on.
Yep.
It's just, the emotional investment is what made this, I think, explode so rapidly across, the public and across the country into our psyche.
Well, Dustin, let's listen to when I believe it's the sheriff says that Susan Smith has been arrested. Okay, this is on YouTube, so there might be a little commercial or something at the beginning.
There will be no questions answered after the statement. The statement is it. Susan Smith has been arrested and will be charged with 2 counts of murder in connection with the deaths of her children, Michael 3 and Alexander 14 months. The vehicle, a 1990 Mazda, driven by Smith, was located late Thursday afternoon in Lake John D. Long near Union. 2 bodies were found in the vehicle's back seat. Identities are pending an autopsy. Charges against Smith will be signed by Union County Sheriff Howard Wells. 16th Circuit Solicitor Thomas Pope said Thursday a bond hearing will be held at 10 a.m. at the Moss Justice Center in York before Circuit Judge Henry Floyd. Smith is incarcerated at an undisclosed location.
Did she confess? Did she tell you where the car was, Sheriff?
You have been listening to Sheriff Howard.
I like how they say no. Will there be no questions? And then they just start going in for the questions. People are so stupid, man. What you think he's going to change his mind? Just because you said that? Jeez. So I thought I'd throw that in there. I found it, and yeah, we got a couple free ads in there. So that or I'll take them out. One of the two.
You are going to advertise on this show. You're going to pay us.
Nah, not if you come to Jimbo. Jimbo might give it to you free.
I don't know.
So when Susan,
unless you're Yummy Bowl,
sponsor us, please.
You can give us at least like one free meal, please. Yummy Bowl. Oh.
When Susan finally admitted the truth, people did not simply feel shocked. Many felt personally manipulated. How would you feel? I'd feel terrible. Like she duped me.
You got these people, they may be, I'm going to call into work, or I'm going to take my day off, my only day off, or I'm going to put my kids with their grandparents, and I'm going to go help this lady try to find her kids. People are, out of the goodness of their hearts, they're sending you letters of hope and stuffed animals and probably flowers and dedicating their time just to be shit on.
The same, televised interviews that had inspired compassion suddenly became horrifying to rewatch. Viewers began studying her expressions frame by frame. And I remember watching this, they would be like, well, look at her here. She's not crying. There's no grief. She's hiding something. So they were searching for signs of deception hiding in plain sight. A trembling voice that once sounded grief-stricken now seemed kind of chilling. Tears that once inspired sympathy now looked performative. America collectively experienced the unsettling realization that emotion itself could be staged, convincingly enough to deceive millions.
I'm sure you can cry until you can't cry anymore, but I'm going to say you will probably see that not the look on your face, but the way your face is.
Well, I mean, you probably got the big old puffy eyes and everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're
the snots.
You probably would just be able to read somebody and instantly know, man, this person they're emotionally wrecked and they've been mourning and crying for days.
Yep.
My makeup's done and I'm ready for a TV interview.
So the media intensified with this transformation and this news of Susan being arrested. So the news networks, they replayed all of Susan's old interviews endlessly, almost turning them in for public exhibits for them to watch. The contrast between appearance and reality became the central fascination of the case. How could someone stand before camera begging for help while already knowing the children were dead beneath a lake? That question became larger than Susan herself. It touched a deeper cultural anxiety emerging in the television age, the fear that media could no longer distinguish authenticity from performance.
Yeah, I think we can sit here and keep beating this story up, but it's just, I feel like, you got probably a B movie actor in this trying to portray somebody that was mourning, and it's just a tragedy that this happened. And like I said, we have some killer moms out there who would never, ever, ever remotely even let an idea like this enter their heads, but they're going to kill it day in and day out by raising their kids. Like I said, my mom doesn't get no better, salt of the earth, sacrificed everything to make sure that we all turned out good. And, she put her life on hold to raise her children. And Susan Smith couldn't do that. And it's one of the biggest travesties, in crime and true crime that you're going to hear about. It's just,
did you hear about this before I sent it to you?
I think I remember it from years past. I don't think I've really listened to any podcast about it. If it was kid related, I probably, glanced over it and went to the next thing because, you like to hear maybe somebody get their own, not decide that being a parent is not what they want to do. Be smart. There's ways to keep having kids if you don't want to have kids, but
right. So Dustin, there's
just sickening.
What I want to do here, we got a few more notes, but I want to throw these notes away to the side. I don't even want to read these. So I just want to talk.
I'm over talking about.
I want to talk to you personally. This case is something that stuck with me. That name, Susan Smith, stuck with me. And I was a sophomore in high school, I think, maybe a junior.
We said, what year was it?
1994 to 95. I was a junior in high school.
I was 6 years old. Right.
So, it's one of those cases that you didn't see that every day on the news. I'm sure it was happening, but the news media only picked and choose. You remember John Benet Ramsey. You may not, yeah. But John Benet Ramsey was another big one. It was all over the news. Another one that comes to mind, it wasn't really true crime, but when baby Jessica fell in the well and they had to dig her out and they got her out alive. There's just so many big stories.
A lot of this stayed regional too. And when we were at the event in Westfield about the Fox Hollow murders, one of the investigators or one of the people there was an investigator on the John Benet Ramsey. And they're like, it was just a perfect storm that they were covering Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber in Colorado, in Boulder at that time. You had all these news reporters there and they picked it up. And if they didn't, it could have been one of those cases that just happened that didn't get the national attention. Because you always wonder, they must have been rich. That's why this is all over the news. But there's just, for some reason, some of these cases just get, the national attention that other ones don't. And in the early 90s, I'm saying a lot of what you've seen was probably more regional, not so much national. But at this time, that's probably when it started to change.
Right. And since this was such a terrible story, I've thought it only fitting that we put a missing child in here from South Carolina. So we're looking for Brianna Freeman. Her case number is M218-822-647. She's been missing since April 9th, 2026, from Spartanburg, South Carolina. She is 16 years old and she's a female. And she was last seen on April 9th, 2026. If you know where Brianna is or have any information about her disappearance, you can contact the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office in South Carolina at 864-596-2222. So we want to wrap this episode up by bringing it back up on a high note. We want to say Happy Mother's Day to Jackie. We want to say Happy Mother's Day to my mom, Dustin's mom. We want to say Happy Mother's Day to everybody except Susan Smith. Screw that lady, right?
Yeah, she can rot in hell.
Yeah. So any famous last words you would like to say, Dustin?
We'll be back next week.
Maybe. But this has been Dark Discoveries, where the deeper you dive,
The darker it gets.